So the first step is to define the goals and vision of the organization, because no two organizations are the same, and every organization has to have its goals and vision, and you should put this on paper so that you can refer to it. Next slide, please. The second step is to decide whether to start small and stay small or grow, or to try to do something substantive at the very beginning, because these requires different organizational skills and different kinds of funding. But whether you start small or big, there must be structure, and this is a list of the skill sets required to set up a clinical trial organization. And I'm not going to go through all of these, and I've probably forgotten some, but you need an executive director and physician leadership, you need trial management, you need core laboratories, you need biostatisticians and programmers, you need medical writers, you need information technology, and you need very good administration. And each of these divisions, which is what I called them, has to have a manager, standard operating procedures that are written and available for review, an organizational chart, trained personnel, documented training logs, and complete documentation that can withstand an audit from sponsors and regulatory agencies. And the regulatory agencies vary from region to region around the globe. The executive director is responsible for all aspects of organization and management and reports to the physician and scientific leadership that is comprised of a diverse group of experts who look for ways to improve and innovate clinical research process and work with sponsors and regulatory agencies to design and execute studies. They come up with the ideas, the executive director executes them. Trial management has to work with a diverse group of people, including principal investigators, institutions and departments who provide the patients, and sponsors who support the study. Standard operating procedures are critical, and they have to develop study-specific workshops, and they handle the randomization and the notification to the sites. They log and track the data. They provide rapid feedback of data quality, because you don't want to accumulate a lot of data of poor quality. You want to fix it up front. And they support the clinical events committees and DSMBs. There is electronic case development that's required. There's database design. There has to be monitoring the data for errors and correction as soon as possible. There has to be statistical analysis of study results and expert interpretation of findings and report generation, as well as query management. Biostatisticians and programmers are critical, and they have to be knowledgeable about the regulatory landscape as well as the clinical questions. They cannot work in a vacuum. The best biostatisticians, the best programmers understand the clinical question being asked. They do sample size calculations. They provide independent biostatistical services for the DSMBs. They do programming to produce endpoint analyses for abstracts, presentations, and publications after the primary results have been published, and they support post hoc analyses for the publications offices. What about core laboratories? Everybody likes to do core laboratories. Well, they're not easy. Each core laboratory must have its own operating procedures, and these have to be codified and available for review. Selection of hardware and software is critical, and they must be validated by IT. You have to handle image acquisition and transfer and storage. You must have training and training logs. You must be able to prove that your technologists know what they're doing and get the same result every time, and they have to be tested. You must know your inter and intra-observer variabilities. There has to be overreading. I believe in 100% overreading, but some people believe in random overreading, and they have to be able to output the data. And when setting up a study, they provide assistance with developing the imaging protocols image acquisition methods, site quantification, feedback based on what is sent to the core laboratory, as well as training. And they do careful assessment of the cost of performing each and every proposed analysis. Every analysis takes time. Every analysis requires hardware and software, and time, hardware, and software means money. And you must know what each analysis costs. So this is a list of core laboratories that are typically available in a full-service CTO, and these are the core laboratories, and these are the kinds of clinical areas that they support. And you can see that, for example, when you talk about coronary artery disease, you need an angiographic core lab, you need an ECG core lab, you need intravascular imaging core lab. If you're talking about hyperlipidemia, you need angiography and intravascular imaging and so on. You need all of these to be a full-service CEO. It's not an easy task. And if you're running these trials, if you're supervising these trials, you have to have CECs and DSMBs, which are independent cardiologists, surgeons, neurologists, and other specialists, as well as biostatisticians who provide the support. So what are they? A clinical events committee systematically identifies, adjudicates, and classifies the clinical endpoints to ensure that they are consistent with standards as well as with the protocol. In parallel, but separate, the DSMB monitors patient safety and develops a risk profile, and they give a recommendation on whether the study should be continued, terminated, or modified based upon the events occurring to that point. They aren't necessarily blinded or unblinded, but they just said this trial has too many complications, we should terminate it. The clinical trial center is responsible for identifying, recruiting, and contacting these committee members, development of committee charters, forms, and dossiers, meeting scheduling, entry of adjudication results into the electronic case report form or database, and independent statistical output. Now, once you've got the primary trial done, and you've reported your primary events and satisfied the charter of the trial, you then have the opportunity to use the data for many other purposes. And so you have to be able to support extended database management and analysis for abstracts, manuscripts, other publications, and presentations. And this is the kind of thing that a group of programmers and biostatisticians can generate for you. Propensity score matching, modeling, landmark analyses, meta-analyses, GE analyses, and so on. And you need medical writers. Now, why do you need medical writers? Well, somebody's got to write the grants, and they've got to be able to do a good job. Somebody has to overview abstracts and manuscripts for style, authorship, submission, tracking, permissions, and communication, because quite frankly, doctors, most of them are not very good writers. They manage the publications offices, so that once the trial is completed, as I already mentioned, they can oversee and coordinate post hoc analyses and publications. They collect the ideas from the individuals who are involved in the trials. They help establish priorities as to which studies should be done first. They help establish authorship, and they supervise statistical analyses. These publication offices are often company-sponsored. For example, the Horizon AMI trial, which was a landmark trial of treatment of acute myocardial infarction with drug-eluting stents, had 2 or 3 primary publications, and as of when I put this together, over 125 secondary publications. That is only possible if you have publications offices and a structure of programmers and biostatisticians. Information technology today is key. They help select the software and the hardware because even with every core laboratory, you've got a huge selection of what is available. They have to help oversee patient confidentiality so that when the data comes in, the patients are de-identified. They maintain data security, which is critical because this is patient records and regulatory agencies insist on data security. Digital storage is a huge issue. These files, particularly with the imaging files, run into terabytes of information, and they must have single and double backup. And they provide a help desk to all the individuals in the clinical trial organization. And you must have a good administration. A clinical trials organization is a business. Don't misunderstand that. It's not a research scientific project. It is a business, and it's a business with very narrow margin, and if you don't make your margin, you are rapidly out of business because nobody will support it with grants forever. There's business development, there are regulatory issues which vary from country to country and region to region. There are legal things that have to be dealt with. Contracts are critical. Somebody has to be in charge and overseeing financing and accounting. You have to have human resources because you have employees and they have to be supported. You have to have adequate both digital storage as well as physical document storage. You have to have somebody who's managing your facilities, heat, air conditioning, light, and so on. And you have to understand, they have to understand the costs and the efficiencies of the entire process. So that, in a short nutshell, are the many components that are necessary to have a clinical trials organization, whether it's done academically, whether it's done as a for-profit venture. And as I said, no two similar organizations are exactly the same, but I tried to synthesize some of them that have been successful. Thank you for your attention.